Welcome back to Shipping Insight 2020, and now we have our Shark Tank. Shipping Insight started the Shark Tank 2 years ago. This will be our third iteration. And in those 2 years, we've seen our new tech, i.e. our chum, get picked up by ship owners, by investors. And today is the face-off between the sharks, made up of ship owners and investors, and our new tech chum. And what are they competing for? They're competing for, well, this is real money, but they're going to be competing for fake money. But more importantly, the Shipping Innovation Award, demonstrating that they truly are the newest, brightest, most innovative tech available in shipping today. So I turn you over to Mark Huang of SeaAhead to tell you a little bit more about what we can expect today and to start the Shark Tank.
Thank you, Carlene. Hi, everybody. Great to be back at Shipping Insight. Sorry we can't all be here together live, but at least with virtual, you can spread your wings much farther, and we have people coming in from all over. Good memories from our last Stanford event. So for Shark Tank, we're gonna have companies present today. We have an esteemed panel, and they will ask some very difficult questions after our 7-minute presentations. But to lay the groundwork, I thought I would just spend about 5 minutes just talking about from where SeaAhead is coming at relative to innovation, because I've heard a lot of talk today about disruption and what are we trying to figure out what's happening around the corner in the maritime sector? How do we react quickly? Where's our world going? If I could throw up some slides. So next slide. So SeaAhead, we're a blue tech innovation platform. We're out of Boston, and we have a lot of partners, including in the maritime sector, as well as some universities and some corporates. And we really look to bring more venture-based innovation tied to the ocean economy. So that could be offshore wind, seafood, and particularly shipping and ports. Next slide. So who are we? Just quickly, my background, I was a marine engineer, naval architect, spent my early years in shipyards, but really after grad school, 15 years with General Electric, and then later at a clean tech venture fund doing business development, as well as strategic investments in sectors such as renewable energy, electric vehicles, LED lighting. It was when I was working in Northern Europe was when a lot of these clean tech advances were first starting to be looked at going out to sea. So that was the thesis today we have at SeaAhead with the team writ large is like, we think the timing is ready now, which I'll talk about in a minute, of at least 3 or 4 macro drivers about what has happened in other sectors that are historically very siloed and maybe not seen as innovative and not very looking to work with an outside community on venture. But today, there's been some big changes, and we believe that, look, maritime is now the time to do this, and that's where we formed SeaAhead, and we purposely put it in Boston. I'll talk about that, why that's the case in a minute. Next slide. So don't need to go over all the issues with shipping. So we all know that from everybody at Shipping Insight, but there is a plethora of challenges, not just regulatory, but as well as operational and economic, and it just seems to almost come on like a tsunami. So the shipping sector today, and I think maybe I just had one other point to as a person who's left the maritime industry now has come back, is I think the difference for me, having left in my early 20s, is that the average public person and even the public sector now has a lot more focus on shipping. Before it was just an afterthought. Nobody thought about shipping unlike a diesel truck or a coal-fired power plant. It's over the horizon, and our goods just happen to show up. So I think there's a lot more public interest about shipping today relative to all the issues that we are facing starting with climate change. Next slide. And just to illustrate that point, the first one is really interesting with BMW. We can list all the different headlines that show up in our papers today, but this one, with the BMW one, is particularly interesting, is what the circular economy. This is a big deal in Europe. You know, what does a BMW have to do with shipping today, other than the fact that a car carrier moves their vehicles? But the idea is that BMW, as an example, a corporate, was has to answer to their board, is asking the question, is forced to ask the question, is how does everything they do come back into a circle, including now looking at who is shipping their vehicles, how are those ships disposed of, separate from all the issues that have been talked about on this earlier today around emissions and other environmental. Next slide. So just to illustrate a point of coming back into maritime after working in some other sectors. So one question, like if you go back 25 years, when I first started to look at clean tech, dates me, centralized grid, coal-fired was the domination. Solar was $18 a watt instead of 70 cents a watt roughly today. There was no electric vehicles. And so those industry, whether that be transportation, land-based transportation, utilities, and even let's use another example, big food. If you look at the stock price of Campbell Soup and some of these big food companies, they're in a steady decline. They're just having a lot of trouble reacting to how the market has changed, as well as technologies. So each one of these three traditional siloed sectors and how they've, some of them were forced to reform, some of them didn't make it, and some of them were ahead of the curve as far as trying to be at the tip of the spear, so to speak, on what the market was doing as well as technology. And so the question raised today, I guess, for us is what is the role of open innovation? And there is some benchmark, as I mentioned here, like in land-based transportation and energy, as well as big food. Next slide. Some people have said, well, clean tech, we have you covered. We have you shipping people covered. And I think I would push back with that. And I think won't get a lot of disagreement here at SHIPPINGInsight. When we go to the clean tech community, which is very vibrant with electric cars, et cetera, and fuel cells and renewable energy and digitization, we don't see too many shipping people. They on their side says, well, we'll cover the shipping sector because all the technologies you're using, but there's a gap. And that's why we formed SeaAhead. And that's why we think the term blue tech actually is a good term, because blue tech, in our view, it does overlap with clean tech and some other sectors, but the difference is that we really make an effort to start with the stakeholders that are on the ocean and move inland, as opposed to clean tech crowd, which with the ocean, maritime, ports, seafood is an afterthought. Next slide. So something, the last panel talked about disruption and how to react to it. This is interesting. This did not exist in my 20 years-ish in clean tech. These are, and it's hard to keep track of them, there's so many. These are coastal cities that are forming blue tech, either incubators or accelerators. And it just shows you what's changing in the industry, in the market today. And some of these are definitely focused on shipping, like in Singapore, as well as Catapult Ocean. Next. How do we quickly look at, from SeaAhead's perspective, relative to the maritime? I mean, our view is that the shipping sector and the ports don't have to reinvent anything. You've got declining cost curves in other sectors. And whether that be technology, clean tech, and we specifically here to talk about the ports and maritime side, once again, is our belief and why we formed SeaAhead, is that we think there's a gap between what's happening and the billions of dollars that are being spent, let's say in clean tech or material science and tech, and how to try and better connect that to the challenges that we've talked about today in the maritime sector. Next slide. We're in Boston, just quickly, why Boston? People said, we're shipping people. We don't go to Boston, we go to New York. Just there, the thought is Boston, MIT by its campus itself produces the most amount of IP, is arguably the leader in the world on clean tech. And once again, the thesis that there is no linkage into shipping, but it is a center of excellence in the world regarding innovation and technology and clean tech. So we want to provide that bridge. Next slide. These are our member companies. You can see we have shipping companies, digital shipping, as well as clean tech. Next slide. And quick case study. Unvector is a clean tech company out of the incubator Greentown Labs. They pitched before 2 years ago, and because of the pitch here, they are working in the maritime sector doing a pilot around gray water, and they've also validated their technology for the ballast water if round 2 comes up with the issue of the IMO questions on ballast water. Once again, we help Unvector bridge into the maritime sector. We think there's a lot more potential to bring clean tech into the maritime sector, as indicated by Unvector. Next slide. I'll just stop there and say we have an incubator, and we're excited. We want to see more of a maritime presence. So we'll stop there, and we're going to now go into our companies.
Great. Come on, sharks. We're ready for you to be hungry. We're ready for you to be tough. We're ready for you to get going and gobble that chum up. So, Mark, tell us now, who's in the Shark Tank and who are our sharks?
Sure. We have, who's presenting today? We have Brent Perry from PBS. We have Carl Fisher, gotta love hydrogen, from SHIP. We have David Ward, who is a member company of SeaAhead, Adaptive Surface Technologies. We have Charlie Bogue from Wind and Wing Technologies. Dipankar Mahajan, who is also affiliated with us at SeaAhead at School of Five, talking about digital shipping, and John Carroll, who from Purify Fuel. And Colleen, would you like the panel to just quickly introduce themselves?
Absolutely. We want to know how hungry they are. We want to know how bloodthirsty they are. Go Sharks.
I'm Marina Hedgebateris from Trail Mix Ventures, co-founder and general partner.
I'm Rich Pruitt. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Operations at Carnival Cruise Line.
I'm Kevin Humphreys with Wärtsilä. I'm the General Manager of Market Innovation.
Hi, I'm Nikos Petrakakos, Managing Partner at Maritime Capital.
I'm Rob Cortell, a serial entrepreneur, former U.S. Federal Maritime Commissioner, and investor.
I'm James Thomas, shipping investor, primarily in the dry bulk space, but also in tankers and in shipping tech.
Hi, Tony Bakos, co-founder and COO of a Canadian SPAC listed on the TSXV, focused on the maritime sector.
So I think Brent is ready to go.
Interesting story coming into this. We're all supposed to receive our hats. I don't know if you can tell, but my hat is a heavily adapted hat. My Canadian border is shut so tight right now to U.S. product that they declared the hats hazardous goods. So they kindly mailed me a logo, and I adapted one of my hats here for today. So interesting story. And again, as I said, I'm the CEO of SPBS. SPBS is my second battery company. I'm also the founder of Corvus Energy back in 2009. I come to this space, if you like, honestly, and having been a shipbuilder and a designer and a factory manufacturer for about 30 years prior to being involved in energy storage, and was drawn into energy storage by the opportunity it presented to improve the bottom line of the ship that it could influence both as hybrids and electrics. Next slide, please. So what we've done in introducing the energy storage system we have, it's both effectively extraordinary innovation in that it takes advantage of all of the best of the supply chain, if you want, associated with batteries, the best lithium cells, the best energy density, the best kind of performance that we could find around the world, but ties them into all of the conservative nature elements of the marine space, the repeatability, the risk management, the future proofing, and ultimately it helps deliver not only bottom line value. Typically we see payback between 1 and 4 years, leaning more and more towards the 1 and 2 years, but it also delivers the environmental impact that is so heavily influencing legislation around the world today. Next slide, please. So we are a very, if you want, small team of people. I have 24 full-time people working for us right now, but we operate as a global business. The headquarters for the company is in Vancouver, BC, and we have field offices in Spain, Norway, Denmark, Germany, New Zealand, India, literally all around the world. And typically we are very heavily engaged with all of our customers on a solution by solution basis. Paul's my partner in this, and we have another group of investors who are principals from two of the bigger companies in power gen in India, Shapur Palanji and Sterling and Wilson. We finished our round A with the Sterling and Wilson Shiport Belangi Group in September of 2019, and we're now entering into our round B, looking for another $10 million for 20% of our equity. What we deliver typically are hybrid and electric solutions for all kinds of vessels. I've, over the last 10 years, installed over 200 ships, anything ranging from small passenger ferries with 10 passengers up to the biggest electric vessels in the world, the Tycho and the Aurora, that run between Denmark and Sweden, and any version of product in between. We are seeing more and more of the market expansion now going into blue water shipping, LNG carriers, bulk carriers, where we can offer some elements of peak shave and some cold ironing support. We do a lot of work with the dynamic power type applications you see in oil and gas because we've built such a very robust battery system. Everything we do is type approved, so we work with DNV, Lloyd's, ABS, literally all the different type approval groups, and have been flag approved by 19 different countries to date for operations within their territories. Next page, please. As you can see, we have a pretty aggressive revenue trajectory. This is based on a fundamentally sound pipeline. Our current pipeline, which has been risk managed, if you want, down to $700 million US, is all pragmatic projects for acceptance and delivery in the next 1 to 3 years. And we know that's simply that market is going to continue to grow, and our application is going to continue to gain market share. When I left Corvus, we owned about 85% of all contracts delivered in the world, and we're looking to take SPBS back into that kind of range of closure for the markets that we serve specifically. The interesting thing for us now is also the scalability of this market space. So this is literally expanded beyond the initial market of ferries and tugboats into many different aspects because the cost of the energy storage systems has decreased significantly in the last 10 years. The performance has improved, and we are seeing a very, very substantial push, if you want, legislatively speaking, to help incorporate these things, that's forcing things like bulk carriers to consider energy storage as part of the solution. I'd like to emphasize we don't see ourselves as the solution necessarily, but certainly as a piece of it. And what energy storage can do is either completely operate a power plant and a hotel load system, or it can contribute to the most cost-effective way of doing that by helping fuel drivers reach the perfect achievement of efficiency for them. Next slide, please. So our company has some unique technology patented. Our thermal management system in lithium battery systems, energy is so dense that fire and explosion are considered at risk and something that's very important in our industry to manage. We have effectively created a patented system for this that allows us to effectively prevent fire and explosion and builds fire detection management into each one of our systems. Comfortably, it is one of the safest systems in the world, as I literally remove heat out of a cell or a battery faster than the cells can generate it. We also have patented our unique ventilation system, which effectively takes any potential gas out of a battery space and manages it overboard. And we have also designed and engineered all of our own software for the control of the batteries and the integration of the batteries with the ship's power management systems. Because of our knowledge of marine, we have total clarity, if you want, of how the whole supply chain works and all of the elements that need to work to deliver a turnkey system to our end customers. We've also helped future-proof our systems by building what we call cell swap. So our batteries are designed that the lithium core can be replaced every 10 years, effectively giving the entire battery system a working life of around 30 years, which comes more in alignment with the management of how ships and engines are built and operated today. We've also created a completely containerized microgrid version of our product with the highest energy density in the world today. I can literally fit with a complete AC output. I can put almost 2 megawatt hour of energy storage in a 20-foot container with all the power electronics to incorporate the translation into AC for charge and discharge. So it truly is a plug-in container that can fit on the back of or the deck of any ship and just literally tie into the AC switch panel on board. So that's a little bit of an insight into our company. We work with leading suppliers around the world. Because of COVID-19 now, we've had to reestablish our business model and have a bill of materials in each one of the continental territories that we operate in. And we are very focused on the service and support of these installations, as every contract we have is what we see as a 30-year recurring revenue generating business. So I am open for questions. Thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you, Brent. So for the Sharks, any questions?
Nico's here. I'll ask a couple. I really like the concept of the containerized, the 2 megawatt system. What is the typical cost of that you're expecting? And is that something you're already able to commercialize, or is that part of where the capital will be going?
No, that's already a commercial solution, Nikos. Thanks very much for the question. And depending upon the charge-discharge rate of the container, the price will range somewhere from about $1.8 million to $2.3 million as a turnkey system.
Thank you.
I have a question. So what are your competitors? Who are your competitors, and what are their technologies?
Actually, the company I started in 2009, Corvus Energy, is probably my biggest competitor. But frankly, I don't really see that we have competitors in a traditional sense. We've so focused on the industrial sort of terminator version of energy storage that we don't really have anyone else that produces something similar. There are different versions, but you tend to have less energy density, more space and weight and volume required. But there are about 7 battery companies that are focused on the marine space, Corvus being the principal, EST Flowtech out of the Netherlands. There's 2 or 3 others that take up a minority position in the industry today.
But Brent, isn't like ABB and a lot of the multinationals who do a lot of power electronics, aren't they doing integration work in the maritime space? You don't consider Absolutely. That like the large multinational as a competitor?
No, they're the people we typically partner with. So our goal is always to work with an integrator company in order to do what we do best, which is the energy storage aspect, and partner with people like ABB and Siemens and Wärtsilä to let them do what they do best, which is usually the balance of systems. And then we integrate our software with their power management, and that tends to deliver the most efficient platform forward.
And do you have a preferred battery supplier, like one OEM that you work with strategically, or you're chemistry neutral?
We're chemistry neutral, but we have very stringent requirements from the cell manufacturers. So it's our battery and our battery design. We use cells today from a company called Kokam in South Korea. But people have to go, it takes us about 2 or 3 years to audit a cell supplier to see if they can meet our cycle life and performance and warranty requirements.
Thanks very much for the presentation, Brent. I had a question about how many customers you have currently, and a little bit more about the ARR to date and projections over the next few years with the 10 million that you're raising.
So which part would you like me to answer first?
The amount of customers right now and the ARR.
Okay, currently we have, I think, 22 customers. We just closed another deal prior to this meeting this morning with another US-based customer, which is a good expansion for us on that. I'm not quite sure what the term you said, ERR?
So the annual revenue that you currently
okay. This year, we basically have been hindered on deliverables by COVID-19. That pretty much stopped a lot of business in its tracks. I think we'll only deliver about 3 or 4 million in this calendar year. We only put the company back together. We ran through a period where we didn't have enough funds to deliver in 2017 and 2018. And we had to go back to the capital raise market then, and we found the partners at Sterling Wilson. They came in September of 2019, and we were literally putting the wheels back on the bus as COVID hit. So that's reduced our deliverables for this year. But we expect to deliver approximately 32 megawatt hours at least next year. We're already under contract for about half of that.
Okay, I think we're out of time. Thank you, Brent. I see Carl's ready to go. Carl, talk about hydrogen. Go for it.
Hello, Sharks. My name is Carl Fischer, co-founder of SHIP. Our technology produces green hydrogen from seawater without the need for desalination. Next. The problem is obvious. It's the emission question for the shipping industry. hit by all corners recently by the decision of the EU Parliament to include shipping in its emission trading policy. Next. And there is, next please. And there is a tall order already in place from the Getting to Zero coalition, which wants to have a emission-free ocean-going vessel by 2030, which is a tall order. Now, what's needed for that? Two things are needed. One is a suitable engine that can deliver the power and can run on a emission-free fuel, which is usually related to hydrogen, be it hydrogen itself or ammonia or methanol, you always will need hydrogen. And of course, the second one that's needed is a affordable fuel that can be used by your industry. And the solution is next. This is our contribution to that problem. Next, please. How do we do that? Our patented membrane-less electrolyzer, developed by Columbia University, uses seawater or ballast water or brine to produce hydrogen. Next, please. I don't have to tell you about the business opportunities for hydrogen, but let's focus on the one in the middle. Shell 10 days or 2 weeks ago put through its weight behind hydrogen, declaring it the most important future fuel for the dominant future fuel for shipping. Now, who's in the ring there? Next, please. This is the competition. You'll see the usual suspects. Some famous names amongst them. And next, please. The technology that they use, you can see on the right-hand side, is one that has to use pure water and can only produce hydrogen. Our technology on the left, the 3D printed electrolyzer, cannot only do that, albeit from seawater, but because we use seawater, we can do a lot more. Next, please. For instance, we can capture CO2 either from exhaust or from seawater. And if you combine that with the hydrogen that we produce, then you can make synthetic fuel. Next, please. Next, please. We can also treat ballast water, or that's one too many, but doesn't matter, or magnesium hydroxide and silica. All of those contribute significantly to our revenue stream, so much so that we can give hydrogen for free away. The gross margin is still impressive. It's about 3 times that of the oil and gas industry. Our technology has attracted considerable interest. Next, please. From the shipping and the maritime sector, but also from offshore wind. But in particular, next, please. Next, please. From ports globally. In fact, we should be piloting as we speak in the port of Rotterdam. Unfortunately, COVID-19 threw a wrench in our spokes, but we have already interest from Soha. In fact, CEO 10 minutes into our presentation a year ago said, I want to buy your product now. And the ports of Antwerp, Abu Dhabi, and Gladstone have already expressed the desire that they want us to be in their location. Next, please. Our now upcoming pilot will have the size of a washing machine, lower right. If these work as expected, you can stack them modularly into a standard shipping container and you have a 2 megawatt electrolyzer in no time. Next, please. We are currently working with Wilhelmsen Shipping. Some of you may know the name as an OEM and distributor of our electrolyzer parts, the 3D printed ones. And we are aiming to pilot in the second half of 2021 in Scotland with the support by Repsol and the Oil and Gas Technology Center. Next, please. Our ask is we would like to find collaborators, partners, and investors. And we thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Carl. And you gave us like an extra 90 seconds. So good. More questions for you. Any questions from the Sharks?
The patent that you mentioned from Columbia University, is that, do you have any extra patent beyond that?
We have the exclusive license for that, and more patents are going to come, and we're working as we go on further research that will add to our portfolio.
And how does the salinity of the water affect the performance of your solution?
The higher the salinity, the better. So we can use brine from desalination, which is one of the reasons why Gladstone and Abu Dhabi were so attracted to our technology, which is obviously the highest salinity you could probably find. Lower salinity doesn't work quite so well, but for instance, the salinity in ports is usually good enough.
Well, Carl, if I could ask a question, just to get an idea of benchmarking with your new electrolyzer, but maybe make an assumption that we're using green hydrogen. That's a good assumption, right? So that cost is relatively low. And then with your new electrolyzer, I mean, what's the metric that you use to compare? Is it per dollar per BTU, or of your hydrogen with your electrolyzer, assuming that it's green hydrogen compared to, well, I don't know if it's bunker C, or you could use it, compared to the other alternative fuels.
So if you compare just the amount necessary, you need about 260 kilo of hydrogen for 1 ton of bunker fuel. As you know, that 1 ton of bunker fuel emits about 3 tons of CO2, so that's a pretty good result. In terms of price, we can produce, as I showed previously, at basically a zero rate for the hydrogen. Of course, do we want to give it away for free? Not necessarily, but we can. And if that is something that the industry needs to have in order to make that transition, we're willing to do that.
So I have a question about your use case. You have a lot of use cases. On which one are you focusing, and how dependent are you on their timeline?
So the use case actually is relatively easy for us to answer. We start out with a pilot, and that will be in a way that we are based onshore in a port, for instance, where we produce the co-products, magnesium hydroxide and silica. But we're also working on and we were actually approached by a naval engineering company about that, whether we can put the system onto vessels and use the ballast water treatment to produce hydrogen, and possibly also capture the CO2 from the exhausts. And then the challenging question would be, can we actually produce synthetic fuel on board as well? I'm not the right person.
I hate to say it, it sounds a lot like Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come.
Sorry, was there a second question?
Observation, which is, I hate to say it, it sounds an awful lot like Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come.
We actually have a lot of interest already from companies that want to collaborate with us from the diverse sections. Repsol, I mentioned that, who are doing it already. Vopak has expressed an interest and offered us their footprint globally to produce imports. So we feel to be on a pretty good track here.
What is your thought about, if let's say the engines for hydrogen take another 10 years, let's say, what's your plan then? I mean, obviously you're tied to that, but maybe there's another plan, a different industry.
Well, one industry that is highly interested, of course, is offshore wind. They want to put our electrolyzers right next to turbines and collect particularly surplus energy, which is a big headache in Europe. So that's one thing. They're working on that procedure for a while now, or have been working, but they need to desalinate. And the desalination units are the ones that cause the problems and the maintenance. If they can fall away, then that would be highly effective for them. On top of it, our electrolyzer is energy flow agnostic, which is something important factor actually in the process of building wind turbines. There's a big chunk of electronic in there that just buffers the volatility of the energy flow. that could fall away if an electrolyzer like ours would be attached to it.
Good. Carl, thank you. Next up, we're going to move on from hydrogen to talk about coatings. David, you're up.
Absolutely. Hi. Thank you, Mark. I've been CEO of AST since 2017. I'm here to talk to you, next slide, please, about something that's an issue for everyone here who's got a vessel, large or small. You want less biofouling on your vessel. And your choice today is either toxic copper biocides, which work well, or non-biocidal coatings that don't work as well and therefore only 10% of the market. And we're here to change that with our revolutionary coatings, going to address this really large $3 billion market with a unique proposition. Our coating performs as well as copper and in some regions better. We're reducing drag on the hull. We're making the coating is slippery. We're not killing things. So that gives you less drag, less fuel burn or more speed, 6 to 12%. We're selling at the same cost as existing non-biocidal coatings. And, clear environmental benefit. We're not releasing toxins into the ocean, but the bigger picture for shipping of not having drag, not having fuel burn, not having emissions, and bringing them down in a sector that's 1 to 2% of world emissions. Next slide. So as a company, we deal with coatings and raw materials across large industries in two parts. Our business proposition is we're going to save you money, and then we bring an environmental benefit alongside that saving money. Marine is our lead commercial sector. We do have one or two others in industrial and consumer packaging. We have an experienced management team in early stage company growth, venture capital, coatings companies, indeed marine technology for coatings specifically. And we're based in Cambridge and outside Boston. Our lab does R&D formulations and samples for customers. We outsource the manufacture of our paint. We're not intending to be a paint manufacturer, and we have a strong IP portfolio. Next slide, please. So looking at the marketplace that this audience is as familiar with as anyone, we've got it in two: deep sea commercial fleet, $90 billion of fuel a year, 1 to 2% of world energy, 1 to 2% of world emissions. Our data projection shows that we're going to be saving $3 million of fuel over a 5-year period on an average side commercial vessel using a Schultz formula and data that we actually have from in use. And the reason for that is copper performance tails off in the later years of that 5-year cycle. We're getting strong demand from commercial shipping customers for this because the whole decarbonizing shipping theme plays to the fact people, shipping, looking at emissions reduction is coming from reducing drag on the hull is still a large part of what you can still go at on a boat in order to make a dent in emissions in fuel reduction, and they'd like to do it in an environmentally friendly way. We can also address the recreational boat market where again, we're getting pull. We've got the highest performing product now in the market for non-biocidal for recreational. Recreational users are prepared to pay a premium over their traditional copper paint, which has been a low price point for a long time, because they want the environmental benefit. And because we're making it slippery, it makes it much easier to clean. If there's light slime, you can wipe it off. And if you're diving your own boat, you don't get a face full of copper whilst you're scrubbing away on the bottom. So we are looking to make a market shift from the 10% of the market that today is non-biocidal to be able to go and attack on a performance basis, on a value basis, the 90% that's copper biocide. Next slide, please. We've got great panel data from Singapore, 17 months, showing us against the existing non-biocidal and biocidal coatings from large marine corporates. We've launched the product, and it's available on the website adaptivesurface.tech. Next slide, please. Our business model is in two phases. We're in the first one. Starting last year, we started selling paint directly to recreational users and through strategic distributors. That's to prove the market and prove the technology works. This year, we're starting to get into testing coatings on commercial vessels and also getting into a JDA process with one and more marine corporates. And in the next phase, we'll be selling or licensing that technology into the marine corporates to take it to market. Why? Because we can go to market directly for recreational. They will buy from a small supplier. They will take a technology and a finance risk on a small supplier to buy something they want. And we don't have to invest heavily in manufacturing and supply chain for that. We can't sell directly today to commercial shipping or cruise lines because they want a strong balance sheet, warranty, global supply. What they will do is test once we've proved ourselves worthy enough to be a test panel, and that's the stage we've got to, and that's what the recreational users showed us. We've just announced a collaboration with Hafnia to do that. And marine corporates also have a history of bringing in innovation from outside to enhance their own product offerings. We're engaged with a number of the large marine corporates on the coating side, a majority of the ones on the slide. Obviously, I can't tell you which ones because we're under NDA at this point. Next slide, please. So what's our ask? $5 million convertible loan note at a discount to next round with a cap and irregular interest. But the most important thing we're looking for is a strategic partner in the marine industry, either a direct customer or someone who's inherently connected to the marine network to allow us to really push forward with this as our lead marine sector. Use of proceeds, take the company through to profitability, supporting sales, marketing, working capital, strengthening our balance sheet for the inevitable arm wrestling that we're going to have with a large marine corporate, do some work in our other sectors, including ICE and the industrial, to broaden our value to those corporates, because we're aiming for a trade sale to a corporate. And if I look at just PPG, for example, if we're talking to marine and protective already, we'd like to be in other areas in order to maximize our value. We've benefited from a strong investor base and non-dilutive funding. The marine product was built on the foundation of a $5 million ARPA-E grant from the DOE in 2016, and we've got multiple US defense customer engagements as well. And that's a list of some of our investors and also non-dilutive funding partners. Next slide, please. So to summarize, everyone has a problem with biofouling on their hulls they'd like to get rid of, and they'd like to get rid of it in a way that doesn't use copper. We have something that works and achieves that, and is a revolutionary for an industry that's been working on this for a long time. We're selling that product today, and we're also in test with large commercial shipping and with working on commercial arrangements with marine corporates, and we're raising $5 million to take us through to profitability and build a company that we believe will ultimately be a trade sale to one of the large marine corporate coating companies. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Great. Any questions from the Sharks?
I can start.
Sales.
Or no, go ahead.
What are your sales right now?
In terms of product sales, we're probably under 500,000 in terms of direct product sales. The company has done sort of between $1 million and $2 million of income between JDAs, grants, and product revenue in the past. So we're just in the early phases of direct product revenue.
And sources of funds today?
Venture capital, JDA from customers, and non-dilutive funding, probably 60% VC balance.
And no SBIR or anything like that?
Yep. So currently SBIR with AFWorks for anti-ice. And previously the ARPA-E, Department of Energy, the big program was $5 million, of which 3 came to us. The rest was cost share.
There's plenty of biocidal solutions that have been coming into the market from Chugoku, Nippon, and others. And frankly, the only way these have come to market is through a licensing agreement with iTech. I think you got it right that the only way to get into the commercial market will be through the corporates, as you say. What has been there, and beyond that, you need the full 5 years to test something. So it takes a lot more capital than 5 million. You need a lot of support with them to really get it tested where someone on the commercial marine is able to take it. So, where are your current discussions with these corporates, and to what degree are you looking to do the licensing with them?
Absolutely. So don't forget that the company is probably we're already 3 years into test data off our own data, and 2 years in with the marine corporate company. So absolutely right. It's not a case of starting from now for 5 years. We are at heads of terms with at least one of the JDA for going forward with the marine corporate, because they've had our materials in test for 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, and their internal data is showing them strongly that we do perform and do what we say. I think that's been one of the biggest things. Yes, it's a long-term process, but in effect, this started back in 2016. So in terms of the marine product building, so we're pretty well along that journey. We're not ready to license to them yet because there'll still be some work, but I think that'll be 21 or 22.
So are there any application issues that are distinct if you're going to get in commercial? And no offense, when my ships go through dry dock, things are very tightly scheduled and the labor is not exactly the most experienced. Do you need to know anything to put this product on?
No, it is built as on the same basis as an existing non-biocidal, so foul release paint. It's somewhat more durable. I wouldn't say it's certainly not magic in the sense that it's not like a hard metal coating, but it's a bit more durable than a traditional AXO 1100 SR, but the application is exactly the same. It will be applied in the same way as a silicone-based foul release.
Okay, thank you.
Great. David, thank you so much. And great to see you as a neighbor. We have Charlie's next from Wind and Wing Technologies.
Okay, great. Yes, I am Charlie. I'm with Wind and Wing Technologies, and we can jump right to the next slide. First off, thank you all for taking your time to listen to the pitches. We're happy to be here. The problem that we are addressing at Wind and Wing is one we're all aware of. It's the reason this conference exists and many others. The costs of shipping are rising, right? Fuel's getting more expensive. Future fuels will also be expensive. And also decarbonization is a big factor, and it's only becoming larger. Marsoft, hourly from Marsoft on Monday even just said that decarbonization will change the world, and ship owners will need to look for less costly retrofits and useful life extensions for ships and fleets in order to make an aging fleet stay relevant from an emission standpoint. The problem is that most of the solutions available today are entirely permanent, or they're expensive, or they require a new build in order to incorporate that new technology. So it's therefore not a retrofit by nature. Next slide, please. So what we've developed at Wind and Wing is our patented cargo wing design. These are standard 40-foot shipping container units, and they house autonomous wing sails that you can scale multiple units on a barge, on a variety of vessel types, and then they can be deployed or stowed as needed on a given route. The big change here in the market is that this is a modular solution. And we could jump right to the next slide, actually. Just to give you, I want to give you a little core technology background. This was our demonstration vessels out in San Francisco. When the wing, the vessel on the left is our original wing. We partnered with the state of California. This was geared towards the ferry markets, and we ran this on ferry routes for 6 months. And the annualized report out of that project was a 40% reduction in fuel use compared to a diesel vessel. So significant savings. That includes days with no wind, mornings, and everything else. The vessel in the middle is our current demonstrator. It's actually a truly zero emissions demonstrator with 75 horsepower electric motor, and our second generation wing, which is actually twice as powerful. So it's quite a sight to see. And what we've done is essentially repackage this into the cargo wing technology. Next slide, please. To take a quick snapshot of competition, there's a lot of different ways to define competition. You see on the left here, there's some fellow wind propulsion companies, there's LNG, there's fossil fuels, and the like. The difference is there are some solutions here, but they're all permanent again. So being a modular solution, this allows companies to not only feel more comfortable about adoption, they can test something out, but it also gets loaded and unloaded using existing infrastructure. And it also changes the business model for adoption from a CapEx to an OpEx, which is certainly a game changer. Next slide, please. When we look at wind propulsion, one question is wind propulsion really a market? And these are just a few examples of what's happening right now in wind propulsion technology. Flettner rotors are getting a lot of press, and well, they should. Norse Power on the left there is a company that's done well raising money. They're on a variety of ships providing benefits. Wallenius Marine up in Sweden has launched their car carrying project. And then on the right, you have Neoline out of France, which has signed a deal with Renault for 2 car carriers to cross the Atlantic. So these are significant investments that are happening right now. We can go to the next slide, please. Taking that a little further, if we look at this is the wind propulsion technology market as a whole. This is not a theory. At the end of this year, we'll have 14 installations in the market of various technologies on various ships, on large-scale ships. With conservative numbers that we're aware of, this goes to well over 100 in the next 2 years, and then it goes up quickly from there. The UK Maritime Plan did a study last year, and they estimate that the wind propulsion technology market will grow from the hundreds of millions this decade to a $2.5 billion market in 2050. So we know there's a need, and we know that there's a market there, and we feel really well positioned in order to take advantage of that. Next slide, please. On the left here, we have a little three-year snapshot of what we see for our company growth. On the right is really what I'm here to pitch today. We're at a stage where we've done all the wind tunnel testing, engineering. We've had a third-party validation of our engineering from an institute in the Netherlands, which also suggested our next step is true market testing, which we need the capital in order to do that. We'd like to test one track out of California. We've identified a route and an operator that essentially, if we can provide a couple of test units, there's a good chance we can have those on a ship in the real near future here and actually test them in the market. In addition, we have testing track 2, which is showcasing more the autonomous nature on barges. That we believe cargo wings not only have a role to play in the energy transition right now from present day to future fuels, but also autonomy. So autonomous shipping is often thought of just from a piloting standpoint of operators using a laptop or what have you to control a ship. But if you can make fuel autonomous, wind as a fuel is actually the only fuel that's scaled to blue ocean right now that's truly renewable and truly free. And it's also delivered at the point of use on the ship without any additional infrastructure. So if you can make a ship not only controlled autonomously, but fueled autonomously, that becomes a real game changer. Next slide, please. For us as a company, today I'm here to ask for $3 million for 30% equity. And we would use that money for the first couple of years in the testing and the production to get to scale. Based on what we know in the benchmarks of the industry and where it's going, we see a leasing model that would get us to $35 million in revenue in the next 5 years. Based on the sort of exits that we know of, that $3 million would turn into a 4 or 5 times on investment in that first 5 years, which is a great investment. There is also the opportunity to look at licensing as well, partnering with some larger industry player to scale even faster. Next slide, please. So in summary, disruptive technology, all the good features that you want in an investment. We are IP protected in our design as a container. And the last point that I would add is that wind propulsion as a technology pairs with any future fuel and any technology that's in the hull. So whatever propulsion and you end up putting in a hull, whether it's hydrogen, batteries, or anything else, you can still use wind, and you'll just use less of that other technology as well. So last slide, please, is just our team. You can see who we are, and we're excited to be here. We have a lot of strategic partnerships, and happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Who's the first shark for a question?
It's gonna me again. I've been a huge proponent of wind propulsion for ships since probably 2014. I think it is going to be critical for the industry. And your solution is probably the first one I see that is actually applicable to container ships, with the exception of kites, which haven't really caught on as expected. One question, I mean, I like the modularity of it, but how does that affect on a container ship, the stability of having that on there, for example?
Yep.
Or the strength of the containers in the stack underneath?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was part of the study that we had done. It's out of the Martin Institute, which most of you are probably familiar with in the Netherlands. It's certainly a consideration once you go above, say, stack number 4 or 5. So you want to be in the 3 or 4, but that's using existing infrastructure on the ships, like tie downs and so on, twist locks. If it's scaled further, there are some solutions that you could use in order to tie it down further if you wanted to go higher. But we see that as sort of further out in the market. And we do see that there's a role probably in barges and in the smaller scale vessels where it can be applicable today. But we do have that we've certainly considered that information.
And what is the cost of one of these containers at this point?
Well, we don't have the final, say, economies of scale cost. What we believe is we would say with the $3 million, we allocate about $1.5 million per testing track. And so we see, initially building one properly to test, I would say is somewhere around $500,000. But economies of scale could bring that down considerably, because the future units that would be leased regularly would be very, very industrial. So you're talking steel wings and containers and items that are very robust by nature. But the original test units, we would want to have them more sensitive.
And how much propulsion do you expect from each unit? How much, let's say, kilowatt per equivalent?
It's a bit different depends on route profiling and what kind of wind you're getting. So you have to make some assumptions. I can give you, we've done all that in our reporting as well. We anticipate 10 to 30% is sort of the savings that has been sort of verified, if you will. But I can send you some information after if you like.
So how do you move from a prototype, which you probably have now, to a full scale, and how big will that be? What are the materials, and how will that differ in terms of handling?
In terms of in terms of handling, I don't anticipate any changes whatsoever. The beauty of the stowing and deploying part is that if you get into alternative weather or anything like that, which also goes back to your original question, Nikos, about the tilting, is that you can also stow them as needed. But in terms of materials and going from prototype, for your question, it's really industrial level. So we're talking steel and normal containers. So it doesn't take that much to do it. It would just be a fabrication process. And once you're fabricated and you have those elements in place as you're trying to scale, then it becomes stamping them out, which is much easier.
Great, Charlie. Thank you so much. We're out of time. We're going to now switch gears to talk about digital shipping. Dipankar, you're up.
All right. Hi, everyone. Hello from Singapore. It's close to midnight here. So let me start quickly by stating what is Spoolify. So Spoolify is the AI platform automating the services supply chain, thereby reducing the associated inefficiencies, cost of failures, and carbon emissions. We are headquartered in US. Next slide, please. So, why we're doing this, let me start by telling you a true story. So this happened with one of the ships sailing in the waters of Aruba. Now, one of the lifeboats developed a crack. And normally it so happens that if your lifeboat is not functioning, your ship can be impounded in any of the ports. So the crew had no choice but to get it repaired. Now, a technical superintendent sitting in Singapore had no idea who would be the right vendor for this job in Aruba. After hours of search in Google, they finally found one, but of course they would not know the antecedents of that vendor. Hundreds of emails were exchanged to clarify the scope and to make an award. Another 100 emails were exchanged to coordinate the arrival time of ship and the technicians. Finally, the technicians arrived only to find out that they are carrying the wrong tools. Each day spent by the ship in Aruba, it was costing it $6,000. Next slide. So what happened here? Normally repair of lifeboats take few hours, but in this case, 31 days were lost on scope management, sourcing, and coordination. If we extrapolate these inefficiencies to 79,000 ships globally, every year ship owners are making a notional loss of $3 billion. Next slide. But with Spoolify, things would have been different. Through our NLP-based scope management engine and integrated P2P processes, those 100 of emails would have been eliminated. With a few clicks, the technical superintendent would have known that who are the right vendors for this job in Aruba. What are their antecedents? He would have negotiated the price then and there through our online chat and make an award. Through our shared workspace, all the stakeholders from the vendor and the owner would have communicated better through real-time chat and video calls for better coordination. Technical superintendent would have called upon the external experts to provide the oversight for the job. All this data would have been retained in Spoolify for future references. Next slide, please. So what we are doing, we are actually transforming this services value chain from disjointed communication to unified communication, from disinformed coordination to alignment, from disparate pricing to uniform pricing. Next slide. And by doing so, we are making the process 5 times faster and 2 times more efficient. The time gain can be used by technical superintendent to manage more ships per capita. So you see, we are also unlocking the economy of scales for the owners. Next slide. So AI plays a critical role in our platform. Our NLP-based job categorization engine is helping us with the vendor matching, but also helping us to gain more data on different service types, equipments, and brands. And there are thousands of them out there. This, along with the data from the workspace, would help it to evolve into a full-fledged scope, price, and skill recommender. The scope recommender telling the stakeholders whether the scope of the job is well-defined or not. The price recommender telling what should be the ideal price for a particular job at a particular port. And the skill recommender, what should be the ideal skills for a particular job. So you see, in addition to automating the services supply chain, we are also helping to improve the overall quality of the ecosystem. Next slide, please. Now, we are the right mix of people from technology, finance, and maritime. For me, I've worked in technology and finance for the last 17 years. I've worked in Europe, I've worked in US before starting my own tech company in Singapore. Both Sorish and Inder have been associated with maritime for more than 18 years in the roles of procurement and technical superintendent, who are the two most key positions for services supply chain. Martin is a hands-on tech developer with some association with maritime as well. Next slide, please. So how we make money? So all the jobs that flow through Spoolify, we charge a transaction fee of 8% to the vendors. As of now, the platform is free for the owners. Next slide. Now it's a huge market of $64 billion. Even if we capture 2% of this market by 2024, it will help us to gain a net revenue of $86 million and EBITDA of around $33 million. Next slide. Now, in terms of competition, it's still a brown field with a couple of established players such as ShipEQ and ShipServe, who are more of a yellow pages of this space. We have a couple of new startups, Fleetster and Bluester, who are building a marketplace. But in Spoolify, we are leading the conversation in this space through our technology. Our key USP is our AI models, our first mover advantage, and our contacts in maritime. Next slide. So where we are, our product is ready. We are right now onboarding vendors and the owners for the pilots. We are going to start our operation in Singapore and North America. We are going to start with annual services and also going to introduce non-periodical services shortly. We are going to integrate Spoolify with the leading ERP solutions so that we provide a seamless user experience to our customers. As we move along, we will keep on adding more and more services. Next slide. So to make all this happen, we are looking to raise $1 million, which will give us a runway of 18 months. The funds would be used primarily to kickstart our operations and to bolster our tech and marketing team. We are offering a convertible notes at 5% interest with 2 years maturity, 20% valuation cap, and a valuation cap of $9 million and a discount of 20%. Sorry. Next slide. Now, these are some of the quotes from the leading ship owners. The problem in the services supply chain is real. In Spoolify, with the combination of right team and technology, we believe we are well placed to disrupt this billion-dollar industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipen. Who would like to go first on questions with Dipankar?
How are you currently acquiring your vendors and service providers, and what's the acquisition cost for that market?
All right. So, currently we are acquiring in Sri Lanka, Singapore, Philippines, and of course, North America as well. Now, in terms of acquisition costs, it's not much because, the value proposition that we are offering to the owners or to the vendors is pretty fantastic. In addition to helping vendors to improve their customer base or increase their customer base, we are also offering them a trade finance wherein the vendors are going to get paid in 15 days, whereas we get paid by the ship owners on an average in 90 days or something.
Can I ask a question? Can you explain the difference between the marketplace basis and the collaborative basis with your competitors? I don't really understand how you distinguish yourself from your.
Okay, so what happens is in market space is only about sourcing, but in Spoolify, sourcing is one portion of it. But the collaboration in real time, the workspace that we are offering is very unique to us only, where the stakeholders from vendor and the owners can collaborate in real time through video calls and chats for completing the job. All other parties, in our workspace, other external experts can be invited as well to provide the oversight for the job. No other competitor is providing this kind of or this sort of functionality at this particular point in time.
So I have a question. These platforms, as I know from experience, are very hard to build and to populate on both sides of the ledger. So who is your customer? Who do you have to sell to?
All right. So, we have already started getting inquiries. We are getting inquiries from express feeders in Singapore. We are talking to Zebon as well. In terms of ships, we have already onboarded around 70 ships on the platform. Okay. Now, in terms of vendors, again, we have, as I mentioned before, right? We have vendors from Sri Lanka already into a platform, from Singapore as well, right? And from Philippines, and soon we are going to add from China and United States also.
So who in the vendor business do you actually have to talk to and get on board?
So it's mostly the service providers who are providing the services. So we are talking, depending on the size of the company, we are talking to CEOs, CFOs of the companies as well on the vendor side.
Do you think your biggest hurdle will be over the next 2 years to try to get the
I think adoption is a key, as the panel rightly mentioned, right? Filling up the both sides of the ledgers are always going to be a challenge. So adoption is a key challenge, but we believe that, with the unique proposition that we are offering to the market, both on the owner side and the vendor side, we will be able to increase the adoption rate quite well. And we believe that once they have started using our platform, they probably will not go away because it provides a lot of convenience to both technical superintendents as well as the vendors.
We're out of time. Dipankar, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
John Carroll is next from Purify Fuel.
Good morning, everybody. My daughter claimed that my head was too fat to wear the hat, so she went out and got me a shark tie instead. So, and I hope Carlene doesn't mind because at least, it's Hermes. So, that's what we're trying to get here. Next slide, please. Since 2019, Purify Fuel has treated more than 40 million gallons of diesel with our Nano 2 combustion catalyst. The catalyst in Nano 2 was invented at Oxford University and perfected by Solvay, a 12 billion euro European chemical company who have used the oxidation catalyst in 14 million new diesel engines. Solvay signed a 10-year joint venture to help Purify leverage this technology for existing fleet operators. Purify then worked at the University of Texas with HARC, the Houston Advanced Resource Center, to perfect our solution for large diesel engines. Next slide, please. Gigafires, droughts, and so many hurricanes, we ran out of names. Climate change is the problem, and fossil fuels are the source. Coal, gasoline, and diesel are the primary culprits. Next slide. As coal and gas are projected to decline, we chose to focus on a diesel fuel, including marine fuel and aviation fuel. Diesel fuel is pound for pound the most powerful fuel available today. Its use is projected to grow for the next 20 to 30 years. This problem is compounded by the long life of large diesel engines. I'm going to show you a video here in a minute of a product being tested on a 1975 tugboat engine that was refurbished and sold again just two months ago. Our goal was to make diesel more efficient and cleaner. Next slide. We wanted to create a solution that touched on all the elements of the ESG model. We wanted a solution that will lessen the environmental impact by reducing GHG emissions. We wanted a solution that would help on social issues, including the safety of workers and the communities that they work in. Finally, we wanted a government-friendly solution that would reduce the cost of diesel by making it more fuel efficient. Next slide. Sustainability is not a tree hugger issue. It impacts your company's ability to survive in today's economy. The Poseidon principles mandate that carbon intensity is directly tied to your cost of capital. Trillions of dollars of capital from places like BlackRock, Morgan Stanley, and CalPERS all inspect ESG plans prior to approving any loan. Finally, Sea Cargo Charter was launched that ties rates of charters these sustainability metrics. Thus, your access to capital and now customers are directly linked to sustainability. Next slide. With ESG goals clearly in mind, we developed Nano 2. It improves fuel economy by 5 to 15% depending on fuel type and loads. It promotes a more complete combustion to reduce harmful emissions, including carbon monoxide, PM, and soot by 30 to 60%. Most uniquely, though, it reduces combustion temperatures to prevent the formation of NOx. The combination of improved fuel economy plus preventing the formation of nitrous oxide combined to reduce the global warming potential of diesel fuel by as much as 15%. Next. Our patented catalyst is comprised of 3 elements. The first is a cetane booster that helps the diesel fuel ignite earlier in the combustion process. It then adds an oxidation catalyst that absorbs oxygen at high temperature levels to keep the engine running cooler, and then releases that oxygen late in the process to burn up a larger percentage of the fuel during the power stroke. Finally, Nano 2 is floated in a lubrication and detergent base to further reduce heat and keep the engines functioning at peak performance. These 3 elements combine to burn a larger percentage of fuel to create power, and less unburnt fuel escapes via the exhaust. Next slide, please. The chart I'm about to go through with you here took us 10 minutes to explain it at a breakout session last night. So I'm going to kind of keep this very high level. The bottom axis, represents crank angle, and the black vertical line in the middle is top dead center. The far left axis is pressure in bars. The red line there is a normal untreated diesel fuel. As you can see, the injection starts about 30 degrees prior to top dead center. Ignition is about 4 degrees prior. It peaks a little over 60 bars of pressure and quickly runs out of oxygen and drops very quickly as the exhaust is opened. The green line there is it's the same fuel treated with our product in it. As you can see, combustion, the injection of fuel still stays the same because that is mechanically controlled. But the ignition starts at 8 degrees prior to top dead center. And then the absorption of oxygen prevents the heat from getting that high. And lastly, at the very tail end there on the right, you're seeing where we begin to release oxygen and actually burn a larger percentage of the fuel during the ignition process. Hence, more fuel is used to create energy, and less unburned fuel is emitted in the exhaust as smoke or particulate matter. Next slide, please. Sound on. Louder.
Peter Leday, I'm senior technician, and I work for NRE Power Systems. NRE is a full service provider with parts and service for marine, rail, and power generation. I have 43 years of mechanical experience. I've worked in emissions, research and development, running repairs, field service. I've done extensive testing in additives, emissions, and our emission certificates with the EPA. Today we're running a test on Purified Fuel Nano 2 additive catalyst product. I've tested a lot of products in the past. I was very skeptical. Most products is what we would call snake oil and never meet the expectations. The engine being tested today was pulled out of a vessel a few months back, was built in 1975. The data we are collecting is horsepower, fuel consumption, emissions being NOx, CO, SO2, and any other EPA-related pollutants. We ran the engine for about 150 hours. We ran it at various RPMs at various loads, just like it would be in the locomotive. The primary challenge with reducing emissions and reducing fuel usage is if the carbon monoxide increases, the NOx decrease, and vice versa. It's a very difficult process to get both to meet emissions.
And I think in the interest of time, can we go to questions?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for the presentation. As you know, as your test supervisor mentioned, there's a lot of skepticism in the industry of additives into engines. So how are you overcoming that skepticism, and how would you work with OEMs, because there's concern if I use an additive, I'm going to void my warranties and damage my engines.
Okay, there's two different questions there. I'll try to answer them both. One is voiding people's warranties. We have a letter of no objection already from MAN. The other fuel providers, including Caterpillar, Wadzilla, EMD, Cummins, and MTU, we've worked with all of them, with the exception of Wadzilla. And we have a planned test with the Wadzilla boat coming up, but they all published their fuel spec, and we had Bureau Veritas go out and perform tests and certify that we meet their spec. Our chairman of the board is the former head of R&D for Caterpillar. He knows how to work these things and has done it very well. The second thing is, how do we test? We actually have an in situ testing procedure that actually tracks both volume and temperature of fuel going in and out of the common rail, and we have both a hydraulic horsepower solution, a torque foot-pounds of torque solution, and a kilowatt-hour solution. So we can actually, in real world, give you grams of fuel consumed per energy output that is relevant to your thing.
John, you mentioned rail. Don't you have some real-world experience using this product?
We have three. Yeah, we have. I mean, again, we've treated 40 million gallons of fuel. I mean, our biggest market is fracking. Our second biggest market is rail. We're right in the middle of launching marine. We just signed a distributor in Singapore, in Mencast. The former Fifth Fleet Commander, Vice Admiral Foslie Miller, is running that group for us. So we feel very confident that we're going to have a good marine launch.
So, John, I'm sorry, just a quick, so you seem to be going after criteria emissions, right? NOx, as opposed to carbon, which is fine. So I guess my basic question is, you can reduce the NOx on a diesel, but to what end? I mean, it's a regulatory question, right? Is it enough to not have to have ammonia and an SCR and all the expensive after treatment that rail and land-based transportation has to have? Or, my question is does your reduction in NOx allow the end user to avoid something downstream that is super expensive, or is it just a reduction? Unfortunately, we're also out of time. Sorry, John. I think the next step, thank you for everybody, is we're gonna go through the Sharks and see how much you want to allocate per company. That's gonna end, and Molly and Carlene will help on the tallying. So shall we start that? Okay, let's start with Rich. Rich, the first one was PBES, the battery. Brent.
Right. I think they were asking for 5 million, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would go in the 5 million with them. The H2, I think they were looking for a little under $1 million. Right. I think it was 950, and I would invest there. And the next would be the adaptive service technology for the remainder.
Okay, so you would zero for the last three.
Well, we didn't hear what the purified fuel was asking for, unless I missed it.
Well, I think we may have cut him off. But put it another way, Rich, what would you be, if anything, could be zero? What would you want to allocate? Would be comfortable allocating for, let's say, purified?
Well, I think I would say, because I don't remember what adaptive service was asking for. I may still have some money left. I can't remember. 5, 1, and adaptive was asking for, I can't remember, I think it was 3 million, right?
I believe so. There's 5 million. Well,
adaptive was asking for 5. Wind and Wing is the one who was asking for 3.
Sorry. So I would say I would just do the remainder for adaptive services. surfaces.
Okay. Good. Okay. Marina, you want to go next?
Sure. Well, thank you to everyone. First of all, those really good presentations. I would say for the PBS, I would do maybe lead at 3. Then Spoolify, I'd do 1 million. Adaptive 2, not the full 5, but I'd say 3. And I'm intrigued by Purify. Again, we weren't sure how much they were asking for, but I would potentially put that amount in, or a little bit under that amount. And yeah, I'd love to talk to Wind and Wing more, but for now, I wouldn't invest at this moment.
Okay. Thank you. Rob?
Okay, let's see. Well, the problem is PBES actually looks like an ongoing concern. So I don't know how much the payback there would be to that, but I would probably put 2 in that. SHIP, I think is interesting. I'd throw $1 million there. Adaptive Surface Technologies, I think they're market issues how you get in, but I put some there, $1 million there. Wind and Wing, I think is interesting. It's kind of a throwaway. I'd put $1 million there too. The problem with Spoolify is I've been there, done that, and I think it's really hard. I wouldn't put any into that one. The additives, I might put $1 million there. So how much have I got left?
Yeah, 5 total,
right? How much? How much have I
got? Sorry, Molly was doing the tally. Let me get that from her.
Well, that's all right. So yeah. I'll go back and just bump them up. I do 3 on PBS, 2 on SHIP, 2 on Adaptive, 1 on Wind and Wing, and the remainder on Purify.
Great. Thanks, Rob. James?
So again, I thought we had 10 million, but I'm going to do it in percentage terms because since I don't know how much capital we have or don't have, and I'm going to go with 30% on PBES or whoever the battery guy is, 30% on Purify because I actually think I have the benefit of having done a lot of work on that. Actually, I think there is some there, and then I would put 20% each on SHIP because the hydrogen hype I think is real, and if you're going to play venture, you want to have some hydrogen hype, and at 20% on adaptive surfaces.
Yeah. Sorry, 10 million. My bad. So you were correct.
Right. So everybody else only allocated 7 million or 4 million or what. That's why I went with percentages. I'd go 30, 30, 20, 20.
Okay. Right. Thanks.
I do love wind propulsion, by the way. I think wind is great, but there are a lot of people in that, and I don't know how it's really going to roll out. But I like wind.
It's all funny money.
Kevin.
Hey, thanks, Mark. To all the presenters, these were great pitches. As a third-time shark, the quality is coming way up, and it's very impressive. I like hydrogen being in early on that, so they're asking for, let's just round it to $1 million. So the hydrogen was great. I like the paint story. It's just not my swim lane. I don't know enough about it to get in there. Again, wind is interesting. But I've seen some solutions have kind of crashed and burned, almost literally. Very interesting, great story, but not my thing. And then I would say Spoolify, I thought I like their AI approach, helping those decisions be made. I know it's tough, but I find it interesting. So I'm going to do the $1 million in Spoolify, and I'm not sure what Purify their ask was. We missed that a little bit, but it's It's a challenging place. Again, a lot of skepticism, but it's an interesting solution. And so I do the 3 million there. So 3 million fuel additive, 1 million spoolify, and the 1 million with the hydrogen. The rest, I'm going to keep my powder dry.
Okay. Nikos.
So I'm glad Kevin went before me, because if he was going to give money to Purify, my investment in Purify was completely based on that, actually, with him being an engine manufacturer. I like SPBS. I'll do the full 5 there. I'm going to do half on the hydrogen ship. I'm not going to do anything on the coatings. I've seen too many crash and burn on that end. I think it's too difficult of a market if you're not one of the top 5. I love wind. I think this is the first solution I see that's viable for smaller ships and for container ships. I'll do the full 3 there. So I'm 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Yeah. I'll do half at Spoolify and half for Purify, and I'll keep the rest.
Great. Tony.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to wear my VC hat as opposed to my private equity hat, different investment thesis on each. So I would put 7 million with SPBS, and then 1 million each with AST coatings and wind and wing, and then 500,000 each on Spoolify as well as ship, and 0 for Purify fuel. And just on that, why 0? I think it's a bridge technology. In some respects, probably ideal for private equity, but not for venture capital. Again, that's not really where you're going to get your oversized returns on such an established business and market. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Tony. All right. So for myself, maybe from my background, I've seen literally crash and burn on the battery integration side a lot. So I would pass on PBS. I think hydrogen and green hydrogen, particularly with seawater. So given Carl the benefit of the doubt that electrolyzer is different with seawater, I think I put 3 there. Wind and wing. My question there is on a structural of how's that going to stay on board a vessel at sea. So I'm going to pass on that. The tanker, we know them, so I have to put in 3. So yeah, and adoptive. Sorry, I skipped adoptive. I would also put in 3 and keep the rest to myself. The reason adoptive is interesting is they're an enabling technology. They could go after multiple markets, I think, other than our issues with shipping and heavy metals. All right, Molly. I think Molly was keeping track.
Hey guys, I know we were all attracted to the battery guy because, quote, it was a real business and real. But did anybody choke on the valuation? Because I actually only gave them money because I thought he was articulate and kind of it was a good idea. But on a valuation perspective, at a $40 million pre for a company that has 0 revenues, I don't know. I mean, Mark, I don't know that we're supposed to discuss what we did or don't. But the striking thing I think about that business is the ask is the highest price by a multiple of any of the others.
So I think the idea is in 7 minutes, right? Yeah, you could like or not like a company for any reason, and valuation is, right? That's a pre-revenue company in a bit of a busy space. So I lean to, I'm sympathetic to your point.
And I did the math. It's 21 times 20. It's 2 times 21 projected sales. So and then maybe a significant multiple over EBITDA as well.
On mute. So
well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard the presentations from the Chum. You've heard the debate and the questions from the Sharks. And you've heard the allocation of their $10 million to to the technologies represented here today. We have used MIT's infrastructure to calculate the results. And the results are that the Sharks have voted that SPBS, Brent Perry, wins the coveted Shipping Insight Innovation Award. Congratulations, Brent Perry and the SPBS team, for your hydrogen battery solution. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, guys. I'm really honored. I really appreciate the vote of confidence.
Well, congratulations, and thank you to our Sharks and our Chum. We'll see you next year at the Shark Tank, but stay tuned for our next speaker.